Let's do it. Right, we are live. Hello, everybody. I'm Helen Pritchard, and this is Casey Hill. Say hello to everyone, Casey.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me on, Helen.
Right, so this is really random. So I do not know Casey. We've got very little dealings. We're in one Facebook group together, and I've been watching his content for the last couple of weeks, and I'm like, I need to talk to this guy, and my audience need to hear from this guy. So instead of like getting to know him, sending loads of messages, I was like, I'm going to interview you, and I'm going to get to know you live on camera. So sorry about this. It's kind of like, it's just, I see your stuff, and right, let's start at the beginning. You introduce yourself as in who you are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Casey. I run the growth department, which basically sits over kind of marketing and sales for a B2B software company called Bonjoro. We're based out of Australia, but we got an international squad kind of all over the world. So it's basically like a customer loyalty platform, does things like video emails and video testimonials. So that's kind of my day job. And on top of that, I also run a small course business, a small e-commerce business. I do a lot of consulting. I teach at UCSD in the content marketing department. I'm here locally. I live in San Diego, California in the United States. So kind of have a lot of plates running, but that's a little bit of kind of the professional background side.
That's a lot of plates spinning. So yeah, Bonjoro, we are a user of it, as far as I'm aware. We have used it in the past. We've not used it excessively, so I'm happy for you to make me fall madly in love with it. So you're head of growth there, which is great. Which is kind of like I'm head of growth for my business too, sales marketing, right? It's great.
Yeah, exactly.
What I love about your content. So just for context, so we're in a group called Nothing Held Back on Facebook, which is it Alan Sultanic started it? Who started it? Whose group is it?
So it's funny. A friend of another founder invited me into the group, and I joined, and everyone started talking about Alan. I'll be honest, I have no idea who Alan is. I don't know any of the premise of the actual group. I joined about 3 weeks ago, and basically just started kind of talking about it. Seemed like a group of other founders and executives and people that were running businesses. So I started just kind of sharing some of my own growth insights, kind of firsthand experiences that I've had from the job, and people seem really receptive, and a ton of people have reached out to me. And so it's been great meeting a lot of different people, and I'm glad that the insights I've been sharing have been valuable.
Yeah, so this is the classic. So someone said this to me, someone said to me once, Helen, you are one of the best I've ever seen at this, is that you'll join a group, you'll sort of embed yourself into the group, you'll be giving value to the group, but very quickly, everyone will know who you are and what you do without you selling to them. And that's what I saw in you. I was like, this guy is slick, right? This is great. This is exactly what I would do if I had all of this great experience. Now, what's funny, I was laughing. I was reading one of your posts and I was thinking, I remember when I sort of was learning to read. So I was a voracious reader when I was younger. And I used to read everything, even stuff that I was way above my capabilities. But what I used to do was just skip the bits I didn't understand and just form a picture. And that's what I have to do when you read your stuff. It's so high level and I don't understand all the abbreviations and all the lingo, but I'm like, I get the big picture. It's really good. But I feel like, so when people say you should like surround yourself with smarter people, I was like, I feel like the least smart person reading this. Like everyone else seems to understand everything that you're saying, and I'm just like, oh, this is brilliant. I don't know what's going on here, but it's great. I love it.
Yeah, well, hopefully there's some good takeaways. I definitely understand, my background kind of comes last decade. I've been in kind of the software world, right? And so in the software world, in the SaaS space, I know that some of the stuff is kind of colored by a little bit of that bias. Now, as a SaaS company, I work with a lot of e-commerce businesses, a lot of creators, a lot of membership businesses. So I touch a lot of those other industries. But in terms of like my central role, I've been in that software world. So sometimes I have to work on making sure I don't put too much jargon in there. So that's a good reminder hearing that from you to make sure to keep it accessible.
Yeah, all of the lingo. I have to Google things. Like we need like a key. These were all these, especially the SaaS stuff. If you're not in the SaaS world, it's kind of like, oh, this is great. But I'm a marketer by trade, so like my thing's LinkedIn. So I train, coach, and consult on how to use LinkedIn for lead gen, and then how to then combine that with Score App to make to do some real lead gen stuff. Awesome. I loved your recent post about podcasts. So in my communities, the one thing I talk about all the time is leverage. So how can you leverage your time, your authority, and your resources? why? So this is one of the things I would say, like, why create a podcast when you can go on other people's podcasts who've done all of the hard work? Why create a Facebook group when you can go parachute yourself in like you've done and like I do in some of the groups I'm in, into a group somebody else has spent all that time building up, who's already got that audience. Like, it's almost when you're looking to scale and grow, it's kind of things like having your own podcast and all that kind of stuff is great, but sometimes I see in my world anyway, it can be like a bit of a procrastination thing. They're like, oh, I'm working really hard on creating my podcast, and it's like, yeah, cool, do that, but that's not marketing yet, because you're going to be, well, at first it doesn't exist, but it's also going out to a small audience. You'll build that up, so build that up, great. But what about, so I must have been on, I don't even know how many, but I'm going to say about 200 or so podcasts. And my real growth strategy was being a guest expert in other people's Facebook groups. So I would come in and be like, oh, I love your group. I really think I can help. Like, so for example, in a SaaS group, I would say, can I come and do a talk on how to use LinkedIn to get your first 100 users or whatever it might be, and try and talk, or go to a PT group, how to get high paying clients using LinkedIn. And that for me was an incredible strategy, because I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. If not, I've probably done 1,000 guest experts in 5 years, because that was really my growth strategy. And I loved your post you did about getting on people's podcasts. You really broke it down, and I thought that was really interesting. Do you want to talk a bit about that? The podcast experience you had with Bonjoro?
Yeah, absolutely. And podcasting was an interesting one. When I first started at trying to get on podcasts, I was pretty bad at it. So it was definitely a learning process. I think one of my chief challenges initially was just getting the right information to be able to pitch effectively. So when I started, I was just using platforms that were very limited in the number of characters I could use. I discovered a platform called Listen Notes on recommendation from a friend. Listen Notes is basically like a huge database. And so why I really like Listen Notes is because Listen Notes has the actual email contact information for about 90 to 95% of the podcasts out there. So what it allows you to do is now have a really nuanced and thorough pitch when you go to write people. And it also makes it easy for you to sort and find people in a certain key space. So if you're looking at, you're a creator and you want to find people that are talking about topics in your space, you can kind of search them. You can see the top podcast producing in that space. It even has a ranking system, so you could see this is a top 5% podcast, this is a top 10%, top 1%. So you get a sense of that. And then when I pitched them, I think that what I really found to be effective was doing less pitches, but spending more time really understanding the show. So watching an episode, figuring out how to have that initial hook be something that links back to them. One of the things that I found that people really appreciated when I pitched them is I started just leaving a 5-star review, like 5-star review on the podcast, and I'd actually attach it as a screenshot when I sent the pitch. Nice. And just like open up with that. And people always care about their show. They care about reviews. So it kind of like sets this positive tone right off the bat.
That's very, very clever. Very, very, and so simple and so effective. And that's what I think. And I know there's more to it than that, but just to say, like, that's what I really love about the content that you put out. It's like, it's simple, but that's a real winner. That's a real winning strategy that you found and that you're now sharing with other people. I think that is very generous of you as much as anything else, because I don't even know what you're selling, right? You're not really selling anything there. You're just being present there, which is great. So the podcast thing is really interesting, because I used to pitch and pitch and pitch. And then what happens now is people are pitching me. And it's like, when you look at people going, can you do this for me? Basically, can you help me with this? Can you do this? Can I come and, do a guest expert? It's the number one thing you want to know is, has this person done any kind of research? Like at least one thing, like give me something that you've watched of mine, or you've seen of mine, or you're a member of mine. Like, and most people just, so like you said, you did loads of copy and paste ones to start with. Did you say you're doing like 50 to 100 and getting hardly any, and then you got it down to like 5 to 10 and you were getting most of them?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I got down to the point where I was actually probably doing honestly 3 pitches a day. So it was way, way down from what I was doing initially. But I was getting 50% yeses. So that meant that I was literally, I'd get 40 or something, in a given month. Like my volume went way, way up. And what I found about podcasts, which I thought was fascinating and something that I think a lot of people might not know intuitively, but this was just our experience, there was a huge saturation effect. And this is what I mean. When we had our first 10, 20 podcasts, we saw kind of like a minimal impact. We saw some impact, but it wasn't huge. once we got to a point where like we had been on, say, 40 SaaS podcasts or e-commerce podcasts or creator podcasts, we started having tons of people that would come to us and be like, oh, we heard about you on this one and this one. And so we had to reach out. And there was this like saturation point where once you had a number of different places that person was hearing about you, that's when it really took off and we started to see really big impact from the channel as podcasts. So just as a note, if it's something you want to try, I do really recommend kind of leaning into it and really embracing that for a couple months to try to produce that saturation.
Yeah, I 100% back that up, because I think I reached my kind of saturation point right at the height of my growth. Like you say, it starts to snowball, and I know myself, if I see somebody on a podcast or as a guest expert or, or being interviewed, it's like it registers once, doesn't it? And then you see them again, it registers again. And then the more you see somebody, it's kind of like, actually, I might listen to that. And then I think people just gradually take that step towards you. But I've done podcasts 5 years ago that I still get leads from today. And one of the things that I always say with podcast marketing strategy is you have to take as much responsibility for marketing that episode as the podcast owner. In fact, a little bit more. And I think that's what always got me in the door, but also invited back. And I was always quite often the number one person on the podcast, because we have a podcast marketing strategy. So because it's some of my best content. It's my best pillar content. I always think I'm at my absolute best when I'm being interviewed by a quality podcast interview, and that brings out the best in me. And I think what I see in my audience is people like, I've been on some podcasts and nothing's happened. And it's like, well, like you say, you're not just got to, like you say, go and do 100. You should be getting on 2 to 3 podcasts a week. So over a year, you've done 100. I would say that as a rule of thumb. Then let's see if it's working. But also, what are you doing to promote that podcast? Because the podcast owner, he or she or they have done your episode and they're on to the next one. And they're now marketing the next one. Your episode is your responsibility. So you should be sharing it. You can do your own audiograms and that kind of thing and put it out there. And we have a page. I know Daniel Priestley talks about this as a strategy, but we have a page on our website with podcasts on it. And we can, somebody had a horrible job of going through and listening to them all once and making some highlighted notes for them so we could say what was in each one. And keep trying to drive traffic to it. And then we post about it on my LinkedIn. So we build up to the podcast the excitement of being on it, and then we market it once it comes out as well. And I think that does make a difference, taking that responsibility. Do you agree?
It's huge. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more with that. I think it's one of the biggest differentiators, to be honest. I've basically offered in a handful of podcasts to even say, hey, we'll put a couple $100 up if you guys want to promote the episode. It's great for us because it's good to come from the more prominent source to have them promoting the episode. They like it because they're getting free promotion of their content. I've had it where I talk to basically my community and I say, go leave a review. Say you heard about it from us. And they start getting all these 5-star reviews piling in saying, heard about it from Casey. You're getting all this great recognition with them. But yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes is this lack of promotion. Hopping on, this person is basically giving you a platform and then people walk away. So I think you captured most of it in what you said perfectly. I think if people embraced that and treated it as their own content and had that same intensity of promotion, because it really is, right?
It's authority content. So it's so important. And it's one of the things that always comes up with me with our market strategy. I'm like, we need to be doing more with the podcast. We need to be more with the podcast, because it makes me sad, the thought that those hours and hours and hours of content would just sort of go into the ether, And we reached out to a good chunk of the podcasts I've been on and asked if just to say we were going to share it again, and would they be interested in sharing ours again at the same time. And quite a number of those people said, oh, can you come back on? I'd like you to come back and do something new, because it's been a while. And I think those relationships shouldn't be transactions of like, oh, you've got a platform, I've got a voice, I want to be on your platform, that's it, end of story. Those are relationships, because every podcast host has all of those other guests that they are talking to. They really are influential.
It's so right. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It is all about a relationship. I did a podcast recently. He was talking about how his kids were getting into surfing, and we went on Tingly, which you can gift experiences, and we sent him a little thing like for surfing, and it's $100 for us, and blown away. I mean, he was so like, couldn't believe someone had done this. Like, he's like, no one's ever done that before. And that's the type of thing where it is about a relationship. It is about what you invest into it. And if you treat it like that and you really think about that, and you're always asking yourself, the way that I network, quote unquote, is I'm constantly in this headspace of how can I help this other person? Who can I introduce them to? Who would be good for their business? Who else can I ask would be a good fit on their podcast? And I constantly am working those gears. And that's, I think, has been a tremendous asset to me over my career.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. So tell me more about Tingling, because this was another post of yours. This is what I mean. Like, I've been in the business a long time, so it's not often like somebody's content. Suddenly I'm like, okay, so you wrote that. Okay, so you wrote that. Okay, so you wrote, this is good. I'm screenshotting your stuff. I'm sending it to people. I'm sending it to my team. You know, we've got to look at this, got to do this. So tell me about Tingling, because you talked about gift giving, didn't you?
Yeah. So there's this site I just found out about recently. So one of the guys on my team is basically the guy who runs partnerships. He's actually the one who found it. His name's Eric, and he's used it, and it's been great for us. So basically, it's called like Tinggly, I think, and basically you can gift experiences. So you can gift someone like a trip or like surfing lessons or music lessons or whatever. And the idea is that we've basically been using it for is instead of just sending like kind of the standard, here's a branded mug, or like one of those standard gift things, you give someone something that's tailored to something about them. If they like a sports team, it's something related to that. If they like, surfing in this case, you do something related to that. And so we've been using that in a couple of contexts. Number one is thank yous when we do a podcast or we do a meeting with someone, but also using it for outreach. Reaching out to influencers who we've been following, we've been engaging with their channels, and we use that as a door opener. It's actually worked really, really well. A lot of people who we've been trying to get in touch with them for, 12 months, 24 months, finally they reach back out and they're like, okay, all right, you got us. Like, that was pretty cool. So we've been having a ton of fun with that. And I find that just across the board for everything, that personalization, I think, is huge. I mean, you talked about the relationship, and part of it, I think whether you're interacting with people already in your ecosystem or you're trying to find new people, personalize it, get to know them, follow their content, have an understanding of who they are, what's going on in their lives, what are key events. That type of thing is super important, I think, to finding success. And also being able to open a lot of doors that, these people who are prominent people get so many pitches. They get so many people reaching out. So why should they pay attention to your, email that sits alongside a million other? I know for me, I delete 99% of what hits my inbox and what hits my LinkedIn. That's just the honest truth. So many pitches, so many collabs. Every day there's a mountain of, can we be featured on your blog? And they don't know about our content. They don't know what we're really about. And so it's just an auto delete. So it's figuring out how to cut through that noise.
And it's interesting because, again, I've been in digital marketing for about 10, maybe 15 years now, but I had a digital marketing agency and moved into the online space, and now I'm in the consultancy. But the whole industry has gone into this depersonalization, really, didn't it? It kind of peaked at this. It's all about, automation and, all the different things that I'm sure a lot of your businesses and the consultancy you do is about, right? It's about landing pages and click-through rates and user experience and heat maps and how can we get people to almost like treating people like percentage points on a graph, right? They are just and I think with AI we're trying to move into let's make things more personalized, let's think more, try and understand our user a bit more, but I still think it doesn't quite hit the mark, like the personalization of taking the time personally to find out something about someone, to do a bit of research, to make that little 10% difference. I think I've seen the industry go really, really far the other way. And I think it's quite nice that we are moving back into that human connection again, because that's where you can compete. You can't compete with the big boys. You want to, people who are spending millions of dollars on SEO and pay-per-click and Facebook ads and whatever. You're not competing with those guys. You can compete on the personal level though.
Yeah. I mean, I think that exactly encapsulates my thoughts. Like, I deal with e-commerce people all the time, and, they're not Amazon, right? Like, they're not going to be like this huge conglomerate that's going to be able to have a 2% profit margin and be able to operate at scale. Like, you can't do that. Your 2% profit margin, you're going to go out of business, right? So I think that the question then becomes like, what is that core differentiator? And typically, from my experience, it's actually building relationships, getting to know those people. So when an alternative does come up, they're like, okay, I'm going to stick through because I know these people. I know what they're about. I know their values. There's all these different things that make you feel really connected and like you're a part of. And that kind of also ties into this other conversation of community, which is super important. right?
Yeah.
Like I hear that with my creator people all the time. They come for the content, they stay for the community. That phrase, I think, encapsulates like the best communities out there who have the strongest retention of their members tend to be communities that actually invest in getting to know the people, and they build kind of that scaffolding. So again, when the alternatives come, people feel connected on a human level to the people that are part of that ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think out of chaos comes opportunity, right? And obviously, with what we've all been through the last couple of years on a global scale, I think everyone's craving it even more. And it kind of does lead me into Bonjoro a little bit. Do you want to talk a little bit about what it is and what it does and how it works? Because that is about personalization, really, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. So Bonjoro kind of has two major things. We do video emails and we also gather video testimonials. So the video emails thing, the reason that we kind of came into this market, we obviously weren't the first video player. There's Loom, there's Vidyard, there's a handful of other solutions. But we saw there was kind of this unique opportunity that all of those were kind of built to be like strictly one-off. Someone writes into you, you record a video back, or like in Vidyard, they use it a lot for outreach. But we thought, when someone opts in or they become a customer or some action happens in your core tech stack, because most people today, they use either a CRM or an email automation system, or you use Shopify to take payments. We said, let's hook up with those systems automatically so that something just pops up on your phone and says, hey, you got a new lead. Here's what they said their key challenges. You can right there click, record them a video. You have a kind of a task list of to-dos. It's very organized. Nobody slips through the cracks, and you can engage with them. So we kind of saw this opportunity to take automation and connect it with you taking this personalized action in a really kind of seamless way. And so that was kind of our positioning. So what I always tell people is, if you're looking to do just a one-off video every once in a while when someone writes into you, one of those other tools I mentioned at the front is probably easiest. If you're looking to have it be part of your business, though, you're like, I want to welcome every customer. Every time someone books in with one of my sales reps, I want to send them a video to make sure that I have a low demo no-show rate. Like all of those types of things, I think Bonjoro, without a doubt, is absolutely the best at that in the market. And so that's where we kind of started. And then now we've been kind of adding these additional things to kind of expand this platform into this overall loyalty system. So our vision of where we want to go here is to say, how do we take your casual customers and turn them into super fans and advocates? That's really what we believe is important. And we think there's not a business right now in the market that's really embracing that real relationship building, right? The real conversations, the real, how do you take that person from, oh yeah, that's fine. That's a product that I bought or a service I bought, to someone who's actively wanting to promote you, talk about you, get the message out. Because I think that's kind of the where we're going in the future. When we think about how we buy today, right? Like we look at reviews, we listen to our friends, we listen to people who are influential in our circles, who have experience, who are telling us, like that's kind of the way that the new cycle works. So we're looking to kind of tap into that and say, how do we help create customer proof for people?
Nice. So pitch me. How would I use this in my business? So we run let's just focus on like the core business, which is the LinkedIn Mastermind. So we run a free 5-day challenge. Next one's 16th of May, guys. So we run a free 5-day challenge. It's going for 5 years. We've had 30,000 people go through it. It's very well tried and tested. We have maybe 1 to 2, maybe we've had 3,000. We'll probably get 1 to 2,000 people in. They do the 5-day challenge. They have, there's a task every morning. There's a live with wine every evening because it's me. So I drink a glass of wine and answer the questions on Facebook. And then they go from there into our sort of email funnel, if you like. And then a percentage of those, between 3 and 4% of those people will buy the LinkedIn Mastermind at £1,500.
Yep.
So then they come in and they become a customer, and then they get all the Thinkific and they get the Facebook community. One of the things I'm really good at is generating leads. We've currently got, I don't even know, Paul Green, who's head of sales, is despairing of me because I generate 30, 40, 50 leads a day just through my scorecard, by showing up, by the stuff that we do. We can't get through them fast enough. So I think there's two places where I can see Bonjoro fitting in. One is, how can we make all the leads that we're getting feel like they matter, because they're there en masse and they're kind of waiting for us to contact them or send them something, or we are sending them stuff, but we have got thousands of leads basically. For example, we started a new scorecard using Score app 6 weeks ago about LinkedIn. Get your LinkedIn marketing score. We've got 1,200 leads in there. and all the data points about them. We know exactly, who they are, what they do, what they're doing on LinkedIn at the moment, how much money they've got to invest, how much they've invested in the past, and all that kind of stuff. So we've got that all waiting. And then we've got the customer journey, I guess, as people come through the 5-day challenge and buy into the LinkedIn mastermind. So
yeah. So the way that I usually think about it is like, the first thing is kind of like when you're looking at that funnel, where is there kind of like the most friction right now, and what does your bandwidth look like? So I guess first of the friction thing, it's like when you first described this to me, my first thought would be taking those 3 to 4% of people and trying, or whoever comes into that email funnel rather, and trying to get them into the mastermind, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's like a slightly tighter group than the top of the funnel. You maximize your kind of like time investment to output. If you could get that from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, presumably, that would be like a worthwhile investment of energy. So that would be one thing. Obviously, at the top of the funnel, it'd still be great. You're going to be doing a lot more videos. So that's where it kind of depends on your bandwidth of like what your team looks like. Do you have an intern who can get in there and also help? But I think that, a couple things. Definitely bring over any custom fields you have. One of the cool things about Bonjoro, again, versus any of the other tools out there, is because we do hook in with the CRM or the email system, we can pull any field data or anything you gather on a form right when you go to record the video. So that's a great asset for you to still spend that same 20 to 30 seconds as you would otherwise, but now you can reference that 1 or 2 little details that they put and make it that much more powerful. The other thing I think is super important is ask questions. So one of the kind of secret weapons that I've found from using video is to use it as a way to continue a conversation. So we ran like a really interesting test where, because we send personal welcomes to all of our trials, we get thousands of those each month. So we looked at people that respond back to one of our Bonjoro welcomes, and then we looked at people who respond back at least 3 times. So like an active conversation back and forth. And what we found is if we send a welcome and someone responds back to it at all, there is a lift, but it's a small lift. It was like a 6%, 5 or 6% lift if they respond back once. If they respond back at least 3 times, it was a 50% lift. So a massive difference. And so what I kind of took from that is if you're able to actually create a conversation with someone, the conversion goes through the roof. So asking those really good questions that get them sharing, get them talking, is going to be that much more emotional investment on their side, and to get them kind of working with you. So that would be some of the starting places I would be thinking about applying that.
Yeah, interesting. And other things like, so if we have data, so we know people who've clicked on a landing page and not bought, for example, like could you send the video to those people? Like, could you do that?
Yeah. So if you have, sorry, what CRM or ESP, like what is your tech stack that you have right now?
See, this is what I mean. You're talking in a foreign language. My CRM ESP tech stack. So we use HubSpot and Active Campaign, right? Is that what you mean? And
that's exactly what I mean. So basically what you could do, so we have integrations with both. Active Campaign is actually our number one deepest integration because we're actually built inside of Active Campaign. So if anyone goes inside of Active Campaign and opens up an automation map, there's a little thing called CX apps, and you can actually just add a Bonjoro element directly inside of Active Campaign, which is cool. So what you can do then is anything that you can activate on an Active Campaign automation map, if you have any, like it could be based on a tag, it could be based on a click behavior, literally any element, you could have the following element be create a Bonjoro. So you could creating Bonjoros based on, time delay after X amount of time, based on someone visiting a landing page but not clicking. All of those could just be done by having that element inside of AC and then produce a Bonjoro element right below it.
Oh, see, a clever, slightly above me. Tech's not my thing. I need Rochelle for that. But interesting. So you can use it in multiple different ways, basically, and you can send it to existing customers. So we have just on the LinkedIn side, we've got maybe 1,800 paying students inside the program, inside the community. So we could communicate with those with video as well, right? With those people.
Absolutely. Some of our top use cases, there's people who kind of like monitor their own internal communities. And when something exciting happens for someone or someone's stuck or like all range of kind of like a thing, they'll create a curated list. And then the woman who runs that community, like Joan is the use case I'm thinking of in my head right now, every week she just gets like 10 of those. So it's a small volume, but she'll like anytime there's anything big, and she'll just do those at the end of each week, and people love them. And her open rates are like 97%, like
Nice.
something absolutely absurd because
Yeah,
it's
I was
just like really tight
thinking,
knit.
yeah. So an in-house head of happiness community manager, so Gillian. So she's away at the moment, so she's probably watching this going, "Oh my goodness, doing more work for me." But we quite often in team meetings, she'll bring people to our attention who are either having big wins or they're having big wobbles. That's what we call it. So like people who are like, falling off the bus, not doing the work, like, maybe life's got in the way, and they're feeling like this kind of way. And sometimes we have people who are just a lot of their personal stuff's getting in the way, and they're sort of, having a bit of a using the group to have like a bit of a meltdown, but in a way. And we quite often send gifts and things like that. But it'd be really nice to have a list of people who are, these people are really winning this week, these people are really struggling, and these people have got personal stuff going on that maybe we could reach out to them and just send them something on video. It doesn't even have to be from me all the time, does it? I mean, most people are sick of the sight of me in my programs, but we have mentors and coaches and head of happiness. We've got a team of people that could get involved as well. So it wouldn't all be on me, but I have quite a lot of free time, believe it or not, because I have such a great team and they manage everything for me. So anything I could do to, and like say, if it organizes it, so I just have to go in and it gives me a list of things to do. You know what I mean? Like, these are the videos you got to do, these are the people, and this is why, or whatever, however it works, which sounds quite clever. Yeah, that would be really good for us. And it was Vicky Jakes who first told me about Bonjoro, and she's a real techie person. So that's why she knows all this stuff. She'll love it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly right. And that's one of the nice things, because it is like a task to-do list. That's, people don't slip through the cracks, and it's just straightforward. You're like, there's 9 people that I need to welcome or engage. And then, obviously the faster you do these, the better, because timeliness in business, as we all know, is like great. But those tasks will just stay there until you do them. And once you do them, it'll disappear. We'll track them. We'll tell you if people open, watch, click, engage. And also, when you send a video, you can attach anything else you want around it. What that means is if you wanted to have like a full promo video that's 10 minutes long, but below your 10-second video, and have your just like quick, like, "Hey, Casey," and then it kind of flows in, you could do that. You could attach a form or a registration below it. You could attach your calendar. I often embed my Calendly. So you can get kind of creative with how you build. You can set up, it's basically a template. So your video is personal, but everything around it can be standardized for a specific application and just make it really easy for you to send that off and it be tailored.
See, I'm not a techie person, but I am a marketer, and I can see my head spinning off in all the different directions. So just talk again a little bit about getting people to come to demonstrations. So we don't do demos, but we do like sort of quick calls for people who are considering joining the mastermind, or they've been in one of our webinars. We've just done a property funnel where we just did it for people in property, and then we went to a webinar, and then people come into calls, and Paul's actually had quite a lot of no-shows this time. So what would you say, how could you use these videos to increase the show rate? Is that the right technical show up rate?
No, that's an awesome question, because that's actually, so the way I discovered Bonjoro was for that exact application. So I basically was running the sales department for a company called Entreport, which is basically like an inbound marketing style solution. And we had like 40% no-show rates. And so we were like, this is not good. Like, our sales reps were basically having all this open time, etc. So someone recommended Bonjoro, and we tried it out. We had a ton of success. And this is kind of what the formula that worked best for me was. So first is connect Bonjoro and Calendly via Zapier. So I know that's, again, some tech speak, but basically Zapier is just a connection platform.
I know. We've got Zapier. You settle Zaps. I know that bit.
Awesome. I love it. So basically, once you do that, every time someone books, it will pop up a task for that rep. Now, here's the key that's really important. Most people send all of their follow-up and reminders when they're trying to deal with no-show issues right before the meeting. I'm going to tell you to reverse that. So what I want you to do is to send it right after they book. When they're still in the headspace of thinking about this thing that they just booked, you show up with a personal video welcoming them. Now they know there's a person on the other end, and you also have this opportunity to what I call establish expertise. So what I would have my sales rep do is sales rep would confirm the time with them, because sometimes different time zones, if you work internationally, like, do that. But the next thing is create that real anticipation. So I would have my rep say, oh, and saw you're an e-commerce business. That's amazing. We deal with hundreds of e-commerce businesses. And, here's insert a use case, for instance, like quick, can be 30, 40 seconds. But now not only are they like, okay, there's a human being on the other end. I've seen the energy. I've seen the excitement. And they kind of gave me something to kind of look forward to. Now I really feel like this person's not just a salesperson who's going to sell me, but it kind of feels like I'm going to talk to an expert. And that's, I think, really powerful as well. So my tips are connected to Calendly so it's automatic. Send it as close to the actual booking date and not the meeting date as you can. And make sure you mention something that is specific to building that confidence and authority for them to show up. And if you do that, I think you'll see a really profound impact on that. And one of the things I tell people to do all the time, if, especially with our charity sectors tend to be really reluctant and their boards are always like, I don't know about this, sometimes tend to be a little bit of an older genre. So I say, here's what we do. Run a comparative test. Do half of it exactly like you're doing it right now. Do half of it with this new process and come back and tell me how you do. And that's like the number one easiest way that I have all my sales team sell the product is just run a comparative test. Then it's just a math equation. It's like we spent 4 hours doing videos and we got 12 more sales. Whatever your numbers are, was that worth it? Either yes or no. And it becomes really straightforward. So I think that's a great thing for demo no-shows.
So one of the objections I come up a lot with, so one of the things I talk about in terms of LinkedIn content is video. So that's one of my 4 pillars of content is video. And and I talk about it all the time. And I do these huge, webinars with hundreds of faces. And when I say video, I can see half the people going, oh, not video. So do you struggle to get people over that sort of personal hurdle of, I don't want to be a video, I don't like the way I sound, I don't like the way I look, I don't, all that kind of stuff that comes up for them?
It's huge. I mean, that people are so resistant, I think, by nature, so many people to video. And part of this is I think people are thinking about it wrong. There's kind of relational video and aspirational video. So because we consume so much social content and movies, we think so much about aspirational video. This is like the Instagram and the people on film and everyone's perfectly dolled up and the lighting is perfect. And it's kind of built to be like, I want to be like this person, right? That's not what we're trying to do with video in a business context. And when we're talking about personal video is all about relational. So when your kid runs in and interrupts your video, or when you stumble, or a dog starts barking, or your neighbor says hi, those are all actually incredibly good. You don't need to cancel and redo your video. That is humanizing you. The point of this is to say, you are important enough that I'm going to take time out of my day to relate to you on a one-to-one personal level. So if you have a studio, if you have all those perfect things, that's totally cool. You don't need to not use that. But if you don't have it, it's 100% okay. When I started, I would go take my videos on my mobile phone while I went for walks around my neighborhood. The light would be funky. The background would constantly changing. I'm kind of always a scruffy looking person, and I got 75 to 85% open rate and incredible engagement rate off the videos. And so what I would tell people is take a step back, realize that if you're introverted, you can be introverted on the video. If you're extroverted, you can be extroverted on the video. Like there's no one model, and run the test. Like you might be skeptical. That's okay. Like test it, send 50 videos in whatever your kind of comfortable setting is. And try. The only thing I'll say is try to get off the script. Try to have it not be mechanical, you reading off lines off of a wall, like just try to genuinely relate and have that kind of human energy with people. And I think you'll see that people are really receptive to that. And you don't need to have a perfect studio. You don't need to be dolled up. You don't need to have all those factors to succeed with a personal one-to-one video.
The thing, I talk about video all the time, and I've been getting thousands of people over that hurdle myself. And there's a few ways that I do it. The number one thing is like the more video you do, the more money you make. It's one of my sayings because it's true. People say, "Oh, but you're so right for you because you're confident and all this, blah blah blah." But when I first started out on video, I was a nervous wreck, and I always say to people, I don't want you to go on video and be like me. I want you to go on video and be like you. That's the point. And 100% what you said then about when things go wrong. When I do my lives with wine, we've had all kinds of things. And people remember that. They'll remember the time the cat brought a mouse in its mouth and I was screaming and all that. And they remember the time my daughter got stung by a bee and her boyfriend fell down the stairs once the bath came through the ceiling. And the time when I've had to go and do something and one of my daughters has come and sat and been trying to answer some questions about LinkedIn. But people remember them. It's almost like Friends episodes. I was on, my first challenge was the one with the bee, or my first challenge was the the one with the gout that Paul always says, because I had really bad gout. But like, it's people remember that and it humanizes you. And I think people like to see me away from my background. So if I do a video with somebody and I'm in my kitchen, they're like, oh, are you in your kitchen? You know, they're kind of like, it's a bit more interesting because I am now pretty branded up, you know, because it's part of my business. But the one thing I always say about video is it has so much value because only you can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree. I mean, that's exactly been my experience. And it's like everything. Like, I'm sure when you did your first podcast, I know for me, when I did my very first podcast, I was super nervous. I was like, I had all my notes. Like, I don't take notes for podcasts anymore. But when I did my first one, I had a freaking wall. Like, I was like, everything's structured. Like, this is what I'm going to say. And you do a couple hundred podcasts and then you just start having fun with it, you know, and not even a couple hundred. Honestly, once I think I did maybe like 10 or 20, you start to get comfortable. You see the different styles, you get used to it. You get kind of in that element where you're like, I'm just going to be me. And just one note, because I think it kind of loops back to the very top of our conversation about the content. One of the things I found that works really well for me when it comes to content is I try to share firsthand experiences that inherently are personalized to me. So I don't go into communities and say, here's the 10 things that you need to do. This. They're going to be like, is that recycled? Is that like, where's that coming from? But when I like describe, I'm like, in 2020, we did this. This was where we started. This was our exact results. This is exactly what we did. People look at that and they're like, oh, okay. Like, this is an actual person who's been there in the trenches, accomplished a result, and they're sharing it. And it's funny because I experimented with that. When I first started on LinkedIn, last year was actually one of the years that I really embraced LinkedIn. I thought, I'm going to run a growth tip series. And I started just posting, and I was like, just the insight. And nobody paid attention to my growth tip series. And I was like, so bummed out because like, this information is so good. Like, why is no one paying attention? And then when I totally changed the format and I started talking about it, just like you've seen in the Facebook group where I shared like this date, this is how I did it. Instead of saying, here's what you should do, I personalized it, totally changed. Suddenly posts getting 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, when before I was getting literally 200 views on post. It was a game changer in how I positioned it.
Which is great because that's one of my other pillars of content, which is tell stories. It's not about adding value. It's about telling stories. And the more specific and the more detailed and the more vulnerable you can be. You did another post, which is great, about some of the mistakes that you'd made as well, which I thought was really good. And I think it's about not trying to be, I've got all the answers. It's like, this is exactly what happened to me. And I think we're coming through from a content marketing point of view. We're coming out of that age of you've got to be a thought leader. You've got to be, you know, adding value everywhere you go. There's no point putting a comment on unless you can add value and it's relevant and all that kind of stuff. And I'm very much like, just show up as you, tell stories, do loads of video because that's how people really get to know you. Put out loads of social proof and put out loads of call to actions. That's my 4 pillars. And people are like, yeah, but what about what time to post and how to write things and how to put gaps in and where to put the link and the algorithm? And I'm like, that is a nonsense. Like, you don't need to worry about any of that. You just need to focus on those 4 things instead. And I think it's really interesting what you said there. And I'm going to use that in my work now because it's the difference, isn't it? And you could say to someone, like you say, try it. You go and put out value posts. You go and give your value and your thought leadership for the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then turn all that same content into your personal story experience and see the difference in the responses. I love that. That's really, really, again, tangible.
And it's what you said is honestly one of the biggest things, like anyone listening here, like that is one of the biggest keys to success is taking a step back. Look, like I'm a data guy. So when I started, like I had the spreadsheets, I was tracking every hour on the post type. I did all of that experimentation. And where I ultimately landed from all of that data gathering was exactly what you just said, which is like being personal, tell stories, take that and realize that if you're a person who's looking at this and saying, I don't know if I have enough that's like valuable to share or I'm early on my journey. Look, if you start out and you're an SDR, the lowest level of sales, there's going to be thousands, tens of thousands of other SDRs out there. And when you tell your story and when you start kind of, you know, in software, they call it building in public. But in the case of anyone else, it's just like what you're currently going through. People relate to that. And they're like, instead of this kind of manicured, perfect, you know, everything was horrible. And then now look at how amazing I am kind of stories. People are like, oh, wow, like this person got their first sale. or they hit their first 6-figure year from being a sales rep. And like, they can look at that and be like, okay, that's really cool. That's the next step for me.
Yeah.
You don't always have to try to be jumping 20 steps. There's
100%.
individual steps. And if you relate to people around that, it's powerful.
And that's another tip that from me in terms of documenting your progress. People say, well, I always say, if you're going to be in a group, pay to play. I know we're not paying to be in Nothing Held Back, but in some of the groups that you pay to be in, so you pay to be in a membership, you pay to play. And the way to maximize your investment is to document your journey in that group, in the context of that group. So, for example, like I'm in a money mindset group and I looked at every post, I searched my own name and I saw my whole post over the last 4 or 5 years. And it's a complete document of my journey, but in the context of that group. So everything related back to what I was learning in that group, but it documents my business growth. And I've had hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of business out of that group. And I never sold anything in there. I never tried to add value or talk about what I did because it wasn't even related to what I did. It was money mindset. It wasn't to do with marketing. But I documented and just took everyone on the journey. And again, like things like I don't want to put personal stuff out on Facebook, on LinkedIn or whatever. Because I document my whole journey and everyone knew I was a single mom, everyone knew I was like, but I'd come out of debt and all the rest of it, started my business because I documented it every single step of the way, and I can look back at my posts and see that when I got engaged, when I met my fiance and I got engaged, it like broke my internet, my version of the Kardashians, like it broke my internet. My Facebook went absolutely wild. My LinkedIn went wild. And it's because people had been following me for years. And because I've not just tried to be a professional person who was just teaching you about LinkedIn, and I was like this kind of messy, chaotic, disorganized woman who was just doing her best and had this kind of weird level of success and wanted to just teach everyone and tell everyone everything, because everything I was learning, I was like, oh my God, this worked for me. Like this could work for you. I think people they're invested in that story. So just start telling your story now. You don't need to wait for something to happen. Just start now. Like right from the very beginning, I've always done that. And it wasn't a strategy. It's just because I like to get a lot of like, self validation from posting on the internet, but it works really well.
Yeah, I love that. And I couldn't agree more. And I think like when we have people listening in too, like think about who you trust and who you follow. And I think what you'll find is those people do what we're both talking about right now, right? Like the people who are the highest performing tend to be the people that tell stories, tend to be the people that are open, tend to be the people that are sharing. And that's how they build that kind of following to come with them. So yeah, I think that's a great takeaway, I think, for anyone.
That's a great takeaway. Oh my God. Right. Okay. So people want to find out about Bonjoro. Where do they need to go, Casey Hill?
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple different ways. You could just go to bonjoro.com website. We have what we call an open trial. So no credit card. You can just get straight in and you can just play with it and try it out and see if it produces results for you. So that's always an option. If anyone wants to reach out to me, you can just shoot me an email, Casey@Bonjoro, CASEY@bonjoro.com. If you have questions about whatever, feel free to shoot it my way, and more than happy to try to help.
Nice. And if people want to speak to you about anything else, about your consultancy or anything else, where do they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. So just Casey Hill, CASEY, last name Hill. It'll say head of growth at Bonjoro and institutional consultant, I think, in the header. That one's me. So feel free to reach out and touch base. More than happy to chat.
Amazing. You know what? It's been an absolute pleasure to get to know you for the last 50 minutes. So thank you very much for that. I'll be sharing this with my wonderful audience, who I think there's just so much in there for them to take away. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, Casey.
Yeah, it was brilliant meeting you, Helen. I feel like I learned so much from this. I always take notes, and I have like all these notes on the side here from this. So thank you so much for sharing as well.
Lovely. Thank you. See you later.
Cheers.
Thanks, Casey. Bye.
Bye.